So he drops the January 6th bomb on Monday night. And this is footage that he's culled through from Kevin McCarthy. It was given to Tucker exclusively. And it's all the videotapes that McCarthy had from Jan 6th. Notably, the Jan 6th committee had this footage, but we didn't see a lot of the things that were shown on Tucker. So I think McCarthy's goal is to sort of get some counter narrative out there, show the public some of the stuff that the Jan 6th committee did not show us. And it was interesting. I think it was actually very interesting. I think Tucker downplayed some of the overall sense of what happened on January 6th. He kind of did the mostly peaceful thing that CNN did during the BLM riots, which is not accurate. But he did break a lot of news on sort of what was happening behind the scenes in some of these instances. And I think overall, we're better off having seen this footage than not having seen it. I'll start with you, Emily. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with you that there's different language I would have used from Tucker, but that's such a small issue compared to the fact that his footage suggests the panel that House Democrats created, the select committee on January 6th that they impaneled to look into this, seems to have hid evidence from defendants' attorneys. Someone was on Laura Ingram's show, one of the attorneys for the defendants, last night said that there was footage Tucker has released that they were never given access to despite asking the DOJ. That's a huge story. The January 6th committee seems to have deceivingly kept evidence about the case of Jacob Chansley, the so-called QAnon shaman, whatever people think of the Ray Epps theories. They also seem to have misled the American people about Ray Epps' timeline of where he was in and around the Capitol. And so those, to me, are much, much, much bigger stories than whatever Tucker's take on the event may be. And even his take on it has been misrepresented by the media. There was a tweet from David French that said, there's so many people who haven't seen violent clips like this one. And he linked to a clip of real violence happening at the Capitol that day. I went and looked at the first 5 minutes of Tucker's show on Monday and pulled screenshots of him showing the violence. His narrative is basically that, yes, there was violence. You didn't see the full story, though. And as somebody who was reporting on the ground at the Capitol on January 6th, I still insist that was the strangest thing, is that there were different things happening on different parts of the Capitol. I don't think you need to be a conspiracy theorist. I think it's just incompetence, as so many conspiracy theories actually are. The sad reality is that our government and the law enforcement in this case just had layers of incompetence. And that's the real story.
QAnon Shaman, Eliana, is one of the interesting ways in and out of this story and its latest developments, because QAnon Shaman is shown by Tucker walking around the Capitol, and it does look like he's being escorted by police. At one point, he walks by 7 to 8 of them, and they're kind of letting him walk around. And Tucker points to this as like, I thought he was a violent insurrectionist. I thought he was one of the most fundamental threats to democracy since the Civil War. This is what we keep getting told. Then why isn't anybody reacting to him accordingly? Now, the Capitol Police have responded and Democrats have responded. It's called de-escalation. That's what they say. And the Capitol Police are mad that Tucker didn't check in with them for their narrative, though it's been given many times in the Jan 6 hearings. They say it's de-escalation. We were outmanned, we were outnumbered, and it doesn't make sense to really go after any particular individual under those circumstances. Well, okay. It is a little strange that we have 7 to 9 officers in one instance and they're not going after him. I mean, if they really believed he posed a threat, I can see, look at this. It is a little strange. And if I were QAnon Shaman's lawyer, and I presume that they have all this footage, they would have had to receive it during his trial, at which he pleaded guilty. He didn't actually have a trial, but he pleaded guilty. So I'm sure they had this video, but I do wonder why QAnon Shaman's lawyers didn't get more into his state of mind to say the guy didn't believe that he was actually committing a felony, because he did have an armed escort through half of his journey inside the Capitol. That's what I would have argued. So as a lawyer, it raised some questions for me. And I don't think the Capitol Police and the de-escalation thing, I get it in general, but it is weird. There are so many cops opening the doors for him, letting him have a total pass. It does make you stop and wonder.
Well, I think we know the Capitol Police from January 6th weren't the most competent force in the country. But to zoom out a little bit, I think one of the main problems that we're seeing here is we've only seen this footage filtered on the one hand through the January 6th panel, which had the former president of ABC News selecting and editing clips that were then shown to the country. And on the other hand, it's now being filtered through Tucker Carlson. And I think what really needs to happen is all of the footage should be released, and interested people should be able to go and see it all without these partisan filters. I'm pretty sure we know the politics of the former president of ABC News, and we know Tucker Carlson's politics. Look, bottom line is whether these the January 6th protesters were violent insurrectionists or whether they were peacefully disrupting proceedings of Congress, these guys were not supposed to be inside the Capitol. They weren't supposed to be in Nancy Pelosi's office, putting their feet on her desk, and they were disrupting lawful proceedings of Congress. And I think to try to whitewash that is distasteful. Sure, you can argue it wasn't as bad as some people made it out to be, but if one or two or five people did that today, walked into the Capitol and went onto the House floor where they weren't supposed to be, that would be a major event. And so I think we should release all the footage and not try to say this wasn't so bad. It's not good.
Emily, I think I get why it's controversial to release it to Tucker, but I also feel like that January 6th committee was so disgusting in its partisanship, and there was no defense. It was a clown show. It was a circus trial. There was no defense. Adam Kinzinger is about as much of a Republican at this point, or certainly a Trump defender, as Jennifer Rubin, or Nicole Wallace. It's a joke.
CNN contributor,
Liz
Adam
Cheney,
Kinzinger.
Right. He's what? Yeah, CNN contributor. Liz Cheney is a Republican, but nowhere near a Trump defender or somebody like a Jim Jordan who would have been poking holes appropriately in some of the things the Jan 6 committee did. And so it was so one-sided. I think McCarthy probably chose a partisan, and as somebody who's more of a pundit as opposed to a straight news journalist like Tucker, for a reason. Here he was. McCarthy got approached by CNN on whether he regrets it. Chuck Schumer's very mad. Do you regret giving the tapes to Tucker? This was just yesterday. Here's how McCarthy responded.
Do you regret giving him this footage so he could whitewash the events of that day?
No. I said at the very beginning, transparency. What I just wanted to make sure is I had transparency.
Do you believe
because I know in CNN, I had here where you guys actually broke where we were. This was a secret location, Fort McLair. I don't know if you got concerned by that. I don't even know from a point of view of security if we could ever be taken there again. But when you broke that at CNN.
So he's pointing out, because one of the objections the Democrats are raising is there are secret routes inside the Capitol that could be exposed in these videos. I don't think they're actually saying they were exposed in the Tucker videos. And Tucker says all the stuff he's okayed for air has been run by congressional authorities, presumably from McCarthy's office, to make sure no secret routes or locations were disclosed, as CNN did, according to McCarthy. So he's trying to play the holier than thou card. Like, I couldn't trust you people at CNN, so I went to somebody I could. What do you make of it?
Well, yeah, and contrast that with how Mitch McConnell handled similar questions. He came out talking to reporters with a prop, totally prepared to criticize Tucker, not to criticize the problems in the Democratic Party that Tucker's reporting seems to be exposing. The same thing is true of Kevin Cramer, of Tom Tillis, of Lindsey Graham, of Mitt Romney. These are all Republican senators who took this bait, what I would consider bait, asking if it's okay to whitewash January 6th from Tucker's perspective. What Republicans should be laser focused on is evidence here. This is new evidence, and it's evidence that Democrats acted poorly. So the small story of whether Tucker is a partisan, I would just say that priorities should be more in one direction instead of on that partisan bickering front. And I remember sitting down with Kevin McCarthy in September, I think it was, and talking to him about the Democrats committee, which they said was bipartisan because, to your point, Megyn, it had Kinzinger and Cheney on it, wouldn't seat Jim Banks and others. But he's basically trying to make a point that committee was so partisan in its nature that it has forever changed relationships between both parties in Washington, D.C., because it shattered precedent. They subpoenaed phone records from members of Congress, et cetera, et cetera. And that is when you see Kevin McCarthy turning around and fielding a question so differently from Mitch McConnell, that's where that's coming from, is how, for House Republicans, this was like a fundamental event that reshaped their mindsets in a different direction, basically. So I think it's really interesting to see how everybody's reacting to this. And I agree with Eliana. Put it all out there, because it is partisan filtering in either direction on a very important, consequential tragedy. One of the ugliest days, I think, in American history, not worse than 9/11, like Steve Schmidt said on MSNBC, but we should be able to just adjudicate the evidence for ourselves at this point.
I've never been able to compost before. It was always too complicated and too much work. Not anymore, thanks to Lomi. Lomi allows me to turn my food scraps into dirt with the push of a button. Lomi is a countertop electric composter that turns scraps into dirt in under 4 hours. There's no smell when it runs, and it's really quiet. Thanks to Lomi, we have way less garbage each week. And instead, we are turning our food waste into nutrient-rich dirt that we can feed to our plants. Now I am composting and creating soil instead of waste. I have a basically limitless supply of dirt from my growing garden. And if you would like to start making a positive environmental impact too, or you just want to make cleanup after dinner that much easier and fun, Lomi is perfect for you. Go to lomi.com/MK, LOMI.com/MK, and use the promo code MK to get $50 off your order. $50 off when you head to LOMI.com/MK. Use that promo code MK for your discount. Food waste is disgusting. Lomi is the solution. Lomi.com/MK. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.